Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me here for my little Hunker Down Christmas concert. Typically, this time of year, I'd be coming off the road, having spent the whole fall crossing the country. I would have seen so many of you in concert. We would have chatted afterwards. We would have hugged each other. We would have told stories. I could have felt your enthusiasm for this music and this work that I do. And gosh, I sure am missing it. But next year, I'll see you next year. And at least we could do this. Right? I had initially planned a more elaborate thing for this concert. We had booked a theater in Winnipeg and a string quartet players that we had selected from the Winnipeg Symphony. We had a really lovely thing planned. And then the second wave of COVID hit in Winnipeg. We got shut down. All those plans got shut down, and so we can't really do any of those things. So you've got me, and Malcolm Guite's going to show up at the end. So hang around for that. This first song isn't a Christmas song. It's just one I felt like doing. It's called "Love Is Our Way."
Love is our way to God. for God is love. Love is our way to God, for God is love. The wilderness road of shame is gone. The desert road of dislocation gone. The stony road of loneliness has now become a royal way, a highway home. Love is our way to God, for God is love. Love is our way to God, for God is love. And all who carry disappointment come, and you fear the fire of judgment come. And those who teach this royal way is not for some. Shame on you. Now lovers come, 'cause love is our way to God, for God is love. Love is our way to God, for God is love. Love is patient, love is kind. Love pays ill, no, never mind. Love refines the finest gold, the charity of saintly souls. The only thing left for us to do is love. If this alone be done, it is enough. And as we love the other, God abides in us. God unseen, but seen in love. Love is our way to God, for God is love. Love is our way to God, for God is love. Love is our way to God, for God is love. Love is our way to God, for God is love.
So I want to do a song for you. It's one of my mother's favorite songs. And whenever I am in Advent season, I always think about my mother. It's her birthday month in December 8th. She turned 89 this year. And my mom, she's just so dear to me. She's a beautiful-hearted person, very gifted musician. She plays piano, beautiful singer and songwriter. She taught my sisters and I to sing when we were little, and we had a family gospel band with matching outfits, and we would tour around, and my dad would preach, and we would sing, and then we'd always go to McDonald's afterwards. That was the deal. That was the payoff for doing these concerts. And really very fond memories. My mother is currently, she's in a home, she's in a care home, and their COVID hit last week, and they went from 0 cases to over 30 in a very short time. And so my mother's in danger in a way that she wasn't even a few weeks ago. And so my heart's there with her, and praying for her safety and all that. This is one of her favorite songs. It was written, the lyric is by Christina Rossetti, a poet from, I think, the 1600s. And she, like my mother, is someone who struggled with mental illness her whole life, anxiety and depression. And she, like my mother, was still able to produce beauty even in her darkest days. And so this poem and this song and my mother all kind of go together in this very, very maternal season. So this is In the Bleak Midwinter.
In the bleak midwinter, frosty wind made moan. Earth stood hard as iron, water like a stone. Snow had fallen, snow on snow, snow on snow. In the bleak midwinter, long ago. Our God, heaven cannot hold him, nor earth sustain. Heaven and earth shall flee away when he comes to reign. In the bleak midwinter, a stable place sufficed. The Lord God Almighty, Jesus Christ. What can I give him, poor as I am? If I were a shepherd, I would give a lamb. If I were a wise man, I would do my part. What I have, I give him my heart.
So this next song, I've been practicing it actually for several months, knowing that I'd be doing this concert. It's called Pop and the Lads, and it's an instrumental guitar piece I wrote for my grandsons years ago. And so I wanted to do it, but it's a bit of a difficult piece, and I haven't played it for a while, so I got it back, and I'm able to do it for you. I've been thinking a lot of my dad this fall, and guitar playing is very connected, and Christmas time for me. When I was a young boy and I first started to develop a desire to play the guitar, I used to play my mom's. My mom had a cheapo electric guitar, and it wasn't very good, but it worked. But I was starting to get to the place where I could play a little bit and needed a better instrument. My dad didn't have a lot of money. And I remember I was looking at the Sears catalog, and in the Sears catalog, there were several guitars, and some were affordable, $35, $50, that kind of thing. But there was a Hofner acoustic with sunburst finish. It came with a case and a guitar strap and a pick. And it cost $120, which in 1968 was an insurmountable amount of money for a child, for sure. But it was even a lot for my dad. And I remember showing it to my dad, and he knew I wanted it. And he said, well, if you can figure out a way to raise half the money, I'll match you. And so I joined the Junior Sales Club of Canada, and I sold Christmas cards for 3 months. Until I had $60. I worked and worked and worked, and I finally came up with $60. And I remember thinking, that is Dad good for it? Is this going to be okay? And I had my $60, and I woke up this one morning, And I took my money down, and my dad was eating breakfast, and I had 3 20s, and I put it beside my dad's bowl of cereal, 20, 40, 60. And he just kind of looked down at the money, and he picked it up and he counted it again to make sure it was 60. And then he reached into his pocket and he pulled out another $60, $120. The guitar came just in time for Christmas. It was just the best year ever. A Hofner Sunburst acoustic guitar. And I've been an acoustic guitar player ever since. And so this is an acoustic number. It's a fingerstyle. That's what we would call it. It's a fingerstyle piece. I wrote it for my grandsons several Christmases ago, having come home from visiting them when they were little boys. They're a bit older now. They're into their early, just sort of just approaching the teen years. So then they're in that delicate transition from boys to men. And it just breaks my heart I can't see them. It's such a significant time of life, and it'd be a good time for you to have your pop-up around, and so I wish I could be with them a bit more. But this one Christmas when they were little, I remember playing Duck, Duck, Goose with them in the kitchen. And if you know the game, it's just a kid's game, and the kids sit in the middle, and whoever's it runs around the outside of the circle and then randomly taps somebody on the head, and that kid has to jump up and chase you around the circle until they catch you, and then they're it, and then the whole thing. And so there's a lot of yelling and screaming and laughing, and I remember coming home from Christmas, and I was thinking about that, and I had my guitar in my hand, and I was just noodling, and this little part that felt kind of like that. It was a circular melody, and it just felt like that thing. Anyways, I suddenly realized that this song was recalling that wonderful time with my grandsons. And so this is Pop Pop and the Lads. So I'm going to play trumpet for you. That might come as a bit of a surprise. Most people don't know this, but my first instrument actually was trumpet, not guitar. And I started playing quite young. My dad was a trumpet player. And so we shared a love of Herb Albert and the Tijuana Brass and Al Hurt and players like that. And so Dad kind of initially taught me how to play. And I remember a great story was when I was, I think, 8 or 9, somewhere in there. I was old enough to join the Drumheller Kinsman Community Band in Alberta. And so I signed up to play trumpet. And I was very excited about it. I was going to join the community band, the brass band. But then it turned out that hockey practice was the same night practice as band, and I had to choose between the two. And I was a terrible hockey player. I mean, I had no real interest in hockey, except for I'm a Canadian boy and all my friends played, and you have to play. And I was brokenhearted that I was going to have to make this decision. And I came home to my dad and I asked him what I should do. How can I not play how can I not play the horn? And we talked about it a little bit, and Dad says, well, you think about it. He says, you've got some gift in music, and you're not particularly gifted on skates, but I totally understand. And he says, so you go away and you think about it, and you tell me in the morning. And if you want to play hockey, we'll go get you your hockey gear. And if you want to play horn, we're buying that trumpet you've been looking at. Another Sears trumpet. It's the same magazine. We lived in Drumheller. That's where you got things from. It was from the Sears catalog. And I remember crying myself to sleep that night, and a little angry that Dad didn't make the decision for me. And the next morning, I told him I wanted to play trumpet, and so we got the horn. Years later, I asked him why he left that decision to me, just such a little boy. And he says, you would have changed your mind. He said, it wouldn't have been a big deal to lose a year, but you needed to start to make decisions for yourself. And Dad was always that kind of a way. So I had that kind of a way, which I loved about him so much. He really honored our dignity as kids to make decisions and live with them, but he was also quite willing to allow us to reverse course and fix the mistakes we had made. So it was good. So anyways, I'll try this for you just because it's fun and I can. I recently picked up the horn again. I let it go for quite a few years. And only in the last couple of years I've started to renew my interest in it. And I don't have quite the lip I used to have or the skills, but it's fun. So I'm going to play a little bit of this one. This is a trumpet, and a little bit of this one, which is a fluegelhorn. You can see the difference. And you can imagine they sound different in the same way they look different. This one is kind of lighter and brassier and got more energy, and this one is mellower and fatter and kind of got more smoke to it, if that makes any sense. So here's a little Christmas nugget on the horns. So this next song I didn't write. It's a beautiful old song. It's a traditional Hebrew melody and prayer. In English, it's "Peace be unto you." In Hebrew, the word for peace, of course, would be shalom. And shalom is a much richer word than peace, the way we talk about peace in the West. Typically, when we think of peace, we think of absence of conflict. But shalom is a more fully orbed wellness, wellness across all relationships. I read recently a book called A Very Good Gospel, and the author was saying that that in Hebrew understanding of shalom and wellness and goodness, especially in the creation story in the Old Testament, when God would create this and this and this and then say, and it was good, the word good sort of meant this shalom thing. It didn't mean the thing itself was good. It meant that the thing was relationally good, that things were well put together and relationally put together. And so shalom, peace, it's a more fully orbed notion than how we use the word. And several years ago, I did travel I've been to Israel a few times, and but the first time I was really struck how everybody uses the word shalom casually in greeting, shalom. When you say hello, you say shalom. When you say goodbye, you say shalom. And even in the Arab communities, it's as-salam or as-salam alaikum, peace be to you. And I remember coming back from there thinking, oh, that's so lovely. And we say things like hello, these meaningless greetings. And it's too bad that our words were not impregnated with something more profound. And then it struck me to look up. Hello must come from somewhere. It must mean something. And so I Googled it. And hello, it turns out, actually is a lovely word. It's a lovely greeting. It's a contraction of an Old English greeting, whole be thou. Isn't that nice? It's kind of like shalom, whole be thou. So whenever you say hello to somebody, that's what's behind it. And it's a good practice to actually, in your mind, impregnate that greeting with that blessing. And it changes how you deal with people.
Peace be unto you from the watching angels, ye watching angels from on high. Peace from the King, the ruler over all things, the Holy One, blessed be He. And may all your comings ever be in peace, and watched by angels from on high. From the King, the ruler over all things, the Holy One, blessed be He. Bless us with peace, ye watching angels who bring peace, ye watching angels from on high. Peace from the King, the ruler over all things, the Holy One, blessed be He. And may all your goings ever be in peace, and watched by angels from on high. From the King, the ruler over all things, the Holy One, blessed be He.
So I'm going to do an older song I wrote several years ago, quite a few years ago now, actually. I think it was back around 1994. I was preparing to do a Christmas album. And I had planned to do just standard Christmas songs, as everybody always does. And I got a call from my friend Jamie Howison, and he's a priest in the Anglican Church, and it was a good friend. And he phoned up and he said, I hear you're doing a Christmas album. And I said, yeah. And he said, well, please tell me you're bringing something new to the table, that this isn't just going to be the same old, which of course it was. And I said, what would I write about? Everything's been written far too many times. All the themes are so overused. And he said, I don't know. He says, write something about the wise men. And I said, like, what would I write about the wise men? And he was quiet for a minute. He says, I don't know, like, whatever happened to those guys? And it suddenly struck me as such an odd story that out of the blue you have this story of some Persian astronomers or astrologers, I'm not quite sure which one is which, but and they see something in the heavens that alerted them to the birth of a sovereign. They leave everything familiar. They travel at night. They find a child who they would have seen in rather unremarkable circumstances, not at all looking kingly or royal, and yet somehow they knew this is who they would leave gifts for. And then they travel home a different way than the way they came, which metaphorically works lovely, because once you meet that child, all roads are new, which could be a little disorienting, but still good. And so Jamie came over to my house, and we talked a lot about this story. And then we tried to imagine one of these wise men 40 years down the road, now an old fellow, and he's teaching Wise Man Wannabe 101 at the local Wise Man, school, university. And he's telling stories, and he suddenly remembers this crazy trip he took when he was a younger man, and how he's never felt quite at home since. And his notion of wisdom and truth has changed. It unsettled him a little bit, but that's been okay. And then he tells this story.
I remember how it started still. Those are days that I remember well. It was something in the stars, was new enough to tell there was something going down. So we set out for a foreign land with no idea what we just might find. 'Cause when you're following a star, you have to walk at night. Sounds crazy even now. And still the search goes on for my way back home. 'Cause I can't go back the way I've known. And now the road for me has changed. Nothing seems to look the same. Don't get me wrong, I'm not complaining. And every star along the way holds a promise for the day when I will be at home again. Yeah, yeah. Some tell me I'm a wise man, a kind of sage, it makes me laugh. 'Cause I don't know what I'm not, barely know what I am, if you know what I mean. But everybody can remember when they had to stop and start all over again. It was something about that boy in Bethlehem, I will never be the same. And still the search goes on for my way back home. 'cause I can't go back the way I've known. And now the road for me has changed. Nothing seems to look the same. Don't get me wrong, I'm not complaining. And every star along the way holds a promise for the day when I will be at home again. Yeah, yeah. On God alone my soul in stillness waits, the glory and the joy of my salvation, the rock on which all form of fury breaks, my stronghold so that I will not be shaken. Wait alone in stillness, O my soul. Wait alone in stillness, wait alone, O my soul. The steadfast love of God be all my strength, my refuge, my hope, and my elation. The enemies of love in vain rehearse a plot to undermine the hope of nations. With tongues they bless, but with their hearts they curse, and lie in wait to bait love's termination. Wait alone in stillness, O my soul. Wait alone in stillness, wait alone, O my soul. The steadfast love of God be all my strength, my refuge, my hope, and my elation. We children of the earth are but a breath. On the scales we are lighter than a feather. I believe and I have heard it said, all power belongs to God altogether. Wait alone in stillness, O my soul. Wait alone in stillness, wait alone, O my soul. The steadfast love of God be all my strength, my refuge, my hope, and my elation.
The lyric of that song comes from Psalm 62. I wrote it during the Advent season several years back. It was the day that the first Syrian refugees landed on Canadian soil in the midst of that crisis. And Canadians, well, people all over the world took in refugees, but Canadians really were quite open and hospitable. And I was very deeply moved by it. And I remember watching on the news the first plane with refugee families arrived, and it landed on the tarmac, and the families started coming off, and I started to weep. So grateful that we had found that within us to receive these folks, these terrorized and wounded people. And that morning, the psalm reading in the daily sort of lectionary readings was Psalm 62, and it refers to God as our refuge. And I thought, well, how poetic is that? You know, that on this day we remember that God is our refuge. And I started just like leafing through the Psalms, and almost every second or third Psalm refers to God as a refuge or strength or stronghold or rock, protector, that kind of language. And thinking to myself, well, of course. But then I started to consider the New Testament, and you don't hear that language used quite the same way in the New Testament. And I was wondering why, and I went to the New Testament, started leafing through. But what struck me is one of the first stories in the New Testament as of Jesus as a young newborn, as a refugee, as someone fleeing with his family in a caravan to Egypt, a despotic king, King Herod, who had heard about his birth and felt the threat to his power, and tried to sort of nip that in the bud before it got out of control. And so God in the Old Testament is a God of refuge and strength, and in the New Testament is a refugee. And there's something about the truth of who God is that is held in the tensions of those two poles, refuge and refugee, strength, vulnerability. And part of the story we tell at this time is of that one. This is the one who comes with tenacious solidarity into our world and takes up our flesh and redeems it. So that's the first song. The song I'm going to do for you now is called Refugee. Last one was about refuge. This is Refugee. The poem is that was the inspiration of the song. It's from Malcolm Guite, and it's pretty self-explanatory.
We think of him as safe beneath the steeple, or cozy in a crib beside the font. But he is with a million displaced people on the long road of weariness and want. Even as we sing our final carol, that hounded child is up and on the road, fleeing from the wrath of someone else's quarrel, glancing behind and shouldering their load, shouldering their load. Ooh, 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 ooh. While Herod rages still from his dark tower, Christ clings to Mary with fingers tightly curled. The lambs are slaughtered by those men of power, and death's squad spread their curse throughout the world. How terrible, how just, and how ironic that every Herod dies and comes alone, defenseless as the naked embryonic, to stand before the Lamb upon the throne, the Lamb upon the throne. Ooh, 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 ooh. I can't resist the burning urge for turning this song into a cautionary tale. The Savior whom this song has been discerning once occupied the belly of a whale, to reach as deep as love could ever fathom, to rescue from the tentacles of hell the wretched, the beleaguered and forgotten, surprisingly their enemies as well, their enemies as well. Ooh, 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 ooh.
So I can never do a Christmas concert without doing this next song. It's called the Magnificat. And the lyric comes from the Song of Mary, recorded in Luke's Gospel, as she kind of bursts out into song trying to explain to her cousin Elizabeth what's going on inside of her. And it's a pretty marvelous story. And Mary has been a very significant figure in my own prayer life. And the Eastern Orthodox Church reverences her as the Theotokos, the God bearer. I wrote this in a little book on Advent several years ago. The Catholic Church venerates her as the daughter of the Father, the mother of the incarnate Word, and the spouse of the Holy Spirit. The Church traditionally has called her the prototypical Christian. She is the one who first received the seed of God into her womb and bore it forth for the sake of the world. So she, in a sense, participates in the salvation of the world as maternal spouse with God. And the point of it being her being prototypical is that what's true of her is true for us, that we have all been created to receive that seed, that word, and bear it forth for the sake of the word. I'll read this. Mary, the prototypical Christian who first received the seed of the word of God in her womb and who bore it for the sake of the world, beckons us all to realize our innate calling to be co-bearers of the seed of God. Even in our troubled humanity, within the drama of brokenness, redemption, and salvation, we too have been invited to take up our role as maternal spouse of God, to receive, carry, and bear forth new life for the sake of the world. Anything less is beneath our dignity.
My soul proclaims the greatness of the Lord, and my spirit exalts in God my Savior, for he has looked with mercy on my loneliness, and so my name can be forever exalted. For the mighty God has done great things for me, and his mercies will reach from age to age, and holy, holy is his name, and holy, holy is his name. And my soul proclaims the greatness of the Lord, and my spirit exalts in God my Savior, for he has looked with mercy on my loneliness, and so my name can be forever exalted. For the mighty God has done great things for me, and his mercies will reach from age to age, and holy, holy, holy Holy, holy is his name.
So we're nearing the end. I have a couple more songs to sing for you. Thanks for hanging in this long already. This next to last song is a song that the lyric comes from a poem that my friend Malcolm Guite wrote. And he's going to be up just in a second to introduce the song. He can do it better than I can. He wrote the lyric, obviously. So that's there. But I want to read you something I wrote about Malcolm. I have a new album out. If you haven't got it yet, this is it. It's called Wouldn't You Love to Know? And I'm very pleased with the album. And with the album, I also wrote a book of reflections, one for each song. There's a chapter for every song. And the CD is in the back. So for those of you that know what to do with that, you can get that as well. But in there, I write about Malcolm. And I talk about, there's two people. Oh gosh, I just lost my spot. There's two very significant people who have inspired my work over the years. And they really almost represent two ages of my work. And the first one would be Bruce Cockburn. I discovered Bruce in my late teens, and he rocked my world. I remember going to a Bruce Cockburn concert on the advice of a friend, almost pushed in there by a friend who thought I really needed to hear him. And the only way I can describe it is when I walked into the concert hall, my cosmos, my world was this big, and when I walked out, it was like that. I don't know how else to describe it, but something was awakened in me that really was a mark of the next 30 years of my work, for sure. And then several decades later, I was sort of coming to the end. I was feeling weary and tired, and I felt like I had written everything that was in me at least once, if not 2 or 3 times in different ways. Like, songs are often just almost a regurgitation of previous things. You're always sort of working on themes and reworking them and trying to say that thing a bit better that you tried to say before. And I felt I had done everything, and I was tired and I was weary and I was a little bit depressed and wondering if I was done, really wondering if I was finished. And then I went to a C.S. Lewis conference in England to sing, and Malcolm Guite was the keynote speaker the very first night. And it was very much like that Bruce Cockburn concert. I walked in shriveled and I walked out alive. There was just something in the way he uses words and his liveliness and his love of words and his love of people, love of Christ, his skill, all those things. So I wrote about him in this book that goes with my new CD. I'll just read you a couple chapters, a couple of what do you call them? Paragraphs. There you go. So just after talking about Bruce Cockburn, I say this, and then there's my friend Malcolm Guite. I met Malcolm at a C.S. Lewis conference in Oxford, England in 2011. At the time, I was aesthetically weary, profoundly so. After a couple of decades of high artistic output, I felt I had tapped every vein available to me and was beginning the slow decline into becoming a nostalgic cover version of my earlier self, a carnival dancing bear signifying a bygone era, propelled by economic necessity. That's bleak. I will never forget watching for the first time as Malcolm walked onto the stage and opened his mouth to release a rush of crystalline poetic waters. I had never heard anyone speak like him. Almost every word resonates with the sages of the centuries and with uncommon eloquence, grace, and wit. As I sat there, suddenly feeling my sad and empty cistern start to fill, I knew my work was far from over. I've since pored over Malcolm's work, both prose and poetry, and I've become familiar with some of the sources of his creative output, and in many cases now his poetry has whelmed in me and come out as a song. So here's an example of exactly that, and here's Malcolm to introduce it.
Well, thanks, Steve. I love what you've done with this poem, and of course, you had quite a lot to do with how the poem itself was formed. I think I remember I sent this poem, Descent, to you as 3 verses, and you liked them and began to work on a tune. And then when you came over to see me so we could work on some songs together, one May, I remember you came to Cambridge. We looked at this poem together and you said, well, actually, the way it works, I don't need 3 verses. I need 3 pairs of verses for this tune to work right. And there's more I think you could say, Malcolm. So I looked at my little 3-verse poem and I thought, you're right, I could develop this. And so I did, and it became the song that you've made so beautiful. And of course, at the core of it was this contrast between what I call the classic gods of high renown, the religiosity not just of the ancient Greek and Roman world, but of many of the great pagan religions. You have the Olympian gods up there, and they're all immortal and glorious, and we poor mortals, are beneath them, and our religion consists of the impossible struggle to rise up to where they are. And I wanted to contrast that with the astonishing idea, the powerful, scandalous thing at the core of Christianity, that God, who is already up there, the God of all gods and the King of all kings, comes down to us, empties himself. And I use a form of poetry where you get a very short line at the end of each verse. It's a kind of diminishment. Anyway, it became this poem which is called Descent. They sought to soar into the skies, those classic gods of high renown, for lofty pride aspires to rise. But you came down. You dropped down from the mountains sheer, forsook the eagle for the dove. The other gods demanded fear, but you gave love. Where chiselled marbles seemed to freeze their abstract and perfected form, compassion brought you to your knees. Your blood was warm. They called for blood in sacrifice, and victims on their altars bled. When no one else could pay the price, you died instead. They towered above our mortal plane, dismissed this restless flesh with scorn, aloof from birth and death and pain. But you were born to these burdens, borne by all, born with us all, astride the grave, weak to be with us when we fall, and strong to save.
They sought to soar into the skies, those classic gods of high renown. For lofty pride aspires to rise, but you came down. Lofty pride aspires to rise, but you came down. You dropped down from the mountain sheer, forsook the eagle for the dove. The other gods demanded fear, but you gave love. The other gods demanded fear, but you gave love.
Where chiselled marbles seemed to freeze their abstract and perfected form, compassion brought you to your knees. Your blood was warm. They called for blood in sacrifice. Their victims on an altar bled. When no one else could pay the price, you died instead.
When no one else could pay the price, you died instead. They towered above our mortal plane, dismissed this restless flesh with scorn, aloof from birth and death and pain, but you were born. Aloof from birth and death and pain, but you were born. Born to these burdens, borne by all, born with us all astride the grave, weak to be with us when we fall, and strong to save.
Weak to be with us when we fall, and strong to save.
Okay, my last official duty of this year is to introduce this song. And when I'm done, I'm done. I'm going home and I can relax for a little bit and try to recoup from what has been such a bizarre, frightening, and in some ways inspiring year as well. So all that's kind of going on at the same time. The song I'm going to do is not a Christmas song. This is more sort of looking forward and trying in some way to be an encouragement for a year that may be quite difficult yet. The song comes from another poem by Malcolm Guite that he wrote several years ago, but when people hear this, they can't believe he hasn't written it since COVID. And I'll read you the lyric in a minute and you'll get what I mean. The song was obviously prescient. His soul seemed to have known something. I want to say something that I wrote in my book, or read something here. It says, I've learned from experience that works of art often know more than their creators. And so there is good reason to attend to them, not as finished works, but as adaptive and sometimes wise companions on the journey of our lives. It should be noted that although this album was recorded, or this song, was recorded in its entirety during the early months of the COVID-19 crisis, the songs themselves were all written well before the global response to murder of George Floyd, before the pandemic. The point being, if I'm allowed a metaphor here, is that songs are like clothing in that they come out of laundry smelling one way, but they take on a whole new aroma after having been worn around a campfire. They might look the same, but they're not the same. Given that the ground has recently shifted under our feet, I was intrigued as anyone as to what these songs might have to offer now and in days to come. So let me read you the lyric here, and then I'll sing it for you. So this is the lyric that comes from a poem of Malcolm. I just kind of adapted slightly. His poem is very similar. It's called Because We Hunkered Down. These bleak and freezing seasons may mean grace when they're memory. In time to come, when we speak the truth, they'll take their place telling the story of our journey home through dark December and stark January with all its disappointments and the dreary work of February, when even breathing seems to be unwelcome work. But because through all of these we held together, because we shunned the impulse to let go, because we hunkered down through our dark weather and trusted to the soil beneath the snow, slowly, slowly turning a cold key, spring will unlock our hearts and set us free. Because we hunkered down. Thank you for being with me, and I look forward to really being with you. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. Oh, one more thing. Stick around to the end of the credits if you want to see a little short video of Pop Pop and the Lads playing Duck, Duck, Goose.
These bleak and freezing seasons may mean grace when they are memory. In time to come, when we speak truth, they'll take their place, telling the story of our journey home. Through dark December and stark January, with all its disappointments and the dreary work of February, when even breathing seems to be unwelcome work. But because through all of these we held together, because we shunned the impulse to let go, because we hunkered down through our dark weather and trusted to the soil beneath the snow. Slowly, slowly, turning a cold key, spring will unlock our hearts and set us free. Slowly, slowly, turning a cold key, spring will unlock our hearts and set us free. Spring will unlock our hearts and set us free. Spring will unlock our hearts and set us free. Because we hunkered down. Because we hunkered down. Because we hunkered down, 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 down. We stood watch just like any other night, counting sheep and trying to stay upright. Shuffling our feet, we heard the beat of an angel's wing, an angel's wing, and above we saw the strangest thing. The light all around began to sing. Glory, 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 glory. We left the fields, moved by the angel's song. Even the sheep seemed to sing along. We ran like drunken poets, looking for their muse, to the beat of angels' wings. And below we saw the strangest sign, and all at once our hearts